as because by and large I'm happy and joyous, so colors automatically flow in my work, and their energy and the cultural influence, of course, is part of subconsciously the saffrons, the reds, the earth tones, the greens. They're all part of my culture. So I get drawn to colorful palette. Yes.
Hi, and welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Palette, the Art Dimensions podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Rosenson, owner of Art Dimensions, your one-stop shop for contemporary art leasing and sales. I can't wait for the interview today. I'm going to be talking with Rajiv Khilnani, a fabulous painter who resides here in Los Angeles, and he is a new artist for Art Dimensions. So I'm really excited to get to know him better. Okay, now for a bit of admin. Listeners, be sure to check out Rajiv's gorgeous pieces at artdimensionsonline.com. On the homepage, click Artists in the upper right-hand corner and then scroll until you see his name. Click the thumbnail and that'll take you to Rajiv's page. Feel free to join the Beyond the Palette Facebook group where you can ask me questions, make requests, and see fun videos with the artists I work with. Also, listeners, if you have 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, and I know you do, please review Beyond the Palette on Apple Podcasts. Your reviews and stars are what really help to get more listeners for the show. Hi, Rajiv.
Hi.
Welcome to Beyond the Palette. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here and for chatting with us. I really appreciate your time and your energy.
I appreciate it. I look forward to our conversation.
Well, what are you up to these days in your studio?
Well, there's a lot going on. I'm kind of transitioning between a certain style. I was working on something called layered series for a long time, and now I'm kind of going more on a textured, like a grit series, where most of my canvases have a lot more grit and textural surfaces. Along with that, my brush strokes have evolved, that I've started using a lot more curves in my works, and so the movement of my brush strokes that you see on canvas are very roundish or circular in motion, which I think brings in a lot more kind of energy. And I've started painting a lot more with white paint, which is something new experience from me.
Oh, wow. Okay. So why the white paint?
Well, I was being in a funny sense, in a lighthearted sense, I've been being accused of being too colorful with my artworks, and some people, I shouldn't say half the market, but there were some people who just could not, or were not interested in colored materials, paintings. They wanted something more muted or something on the lighter tone. So I took it as a challenge for myself to start painting or using a lot more white in my works. And there's a certain degree of maturity that comes up by using a limited palette, and just by using muted colors, that to be able to create professional level work with just a very subdued colors.
Okay, I understand that. And you did use, or you do tend to use, very bold colors. So I'm looking forward to seeing these paintings. I mean, I love those, but I'm also looking forward to seeing the paintings with more muted tones. Did you always feel that painting would be a part of your life?
It's a very good question, because like I tell my friends and everybody in my family kind of knows, all creative professions, and you know that I have more than just art, I have another creative outlet as well. I never chose them. They just happened to me. And the reason I say that is when I picked up art after high school, when I really didn't have anything to do, because I was looking to come to America for my student visa. So I had some downtime. So I did some art classes in school, but I never thought that I would really fall in love with art in general. So I started taking some workshop classes after high school, and I was fortunate to land up working with a teacher who became kind of my mentor for 3-4 years, and she put her heart and soul into helping me explore my creativity and just develop as an artist. And I guess the rest was history, and I never looked back. And the other motivation was that in her studio, when I was doing my artwork, and I was a watercolorist for the longest time. So when I was painting in her studio, I started selling work from her studio. The other artists, my classmates, or whoever participating in the class, some of them had they came from established families, they were very well off, and they were really started liking my work. So which gave me the confidence that, okay, I am more than just a hobby artist.
I can do this for my career.
Yeah.
So you're a self-taught artist? Should I call you that?
In many ways, yes. It's a gray area because I didn't go to an art school, but I did a 2-year certification program through my teacher. So I mean, it's semi self-taught. I would,
Yeah.
if there's a term like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Interesting. And why painting rather than, I mean, for you, why painting rather than sculpting? Or I know you're doing prints with some photographs in them now, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but you don't focus on photography or sculpting, you focus on the painting. Why painting?
Coming from Pakistan, where I grew up, or Asia, is very focused on watercolor stuff. And I was very fascinated right from the start with watercolors because of the simplicity. I mean, being honest, because of the materials, because of the handling of it all. I just did not have the patience to deal with oils and canvas and stuff like that. And my teacher did teach a little bit of sculptures, but I just didn't want to get into the mud and the handling of clay, and more importantly, there were no facilities back home to go and get them in a kiln and all that situation. It was a lot more of a headache. So that's why I was drawn to painting more than any other options in the
Medium,
art
yeah.
medium. Yeah.
And you started with watercolor on paper.
Yes, watercolor. Yes.
Okay, but now you've got your paper pieces and your canvas, and you're using acrylic, or do you use oil paint now?
No. It's so what I did for 14 years was the evolution was I was a watercolorist. I did a lot of realistic stuff. I did a lot of still lives and landscapes and floral series. And then from basic watercolor technique, and I became very good with all three watercolor techniques, which was wet into wet, dry into dry, and the hybrid mode, wet into dry, dry into wet, whatever you want to call it. So I did that. And then from there, after 2-3 years in the class, I had this inner yearning to develop my own style. While doing still lives and floral series was great as a student learning process, but that was not saying this is Rajiv's work. That was just any student work. So from there, I started evolving towards water media, and where I started doing some more of a mixed media stuff, but again on paper, but most of it was watercolor. But I started incorporating oil pastels, a little bit of oil pastels in it. And I started focusing on domes of the Asian architecture, because somehow my teacher used to do doors and windows, and I was kind of influenced by her architectural interest. So I said, I don't want to copy her, but I am going to create my own unique style. So how about I do domes and then add design elements to it, which were very Asian design elements. So I evolved into a semi-abstract theme, but again in a water media. And then I moved to America. When I moved to America, that's where I quit watercolors and water media altogether. First of all, I took a break for 2-3 years when I moved to America because everything was new, trying to understand. Everything was new. And then I got introduced to acrylics because that is where it's water-based. So I was so happy that I didn't have to go to oils. So then I started doing acrylics on paper first, and then gradually evolved to acrylics on canvas. And then, of course, photography and digital media, which you mentioned, is something that I picked up about 5-6 years ago, which we can talk about a little later.
This leads me to my next question, which is about your different series. So you mentioned you've got the layered canvases.
Yes.
You've got the digital art.
Yes.
And there's another series of canvases.
In all honesty, I haven't really promoted my digital art as much as
I know.
because I have like about 300 digital artworks sitting in with me, but I'm conflicted because I don't want to be called a digital media artist. I want to be more represented as in the world, in the public, in the art scene as a fine artist, so that gallery representation or original is original, not the print option. Was never I'm still resolving that conflict of my life.
Okay.
If I find a proper avenue, maybe I'll head in that direction as well. But in terms of the question that you asked, there's a layered series, and then in the last 2 3 years, during pandemic, as a matter of fact, I would say I started experimenting with the grit series.
Okay, grit, is it GRIT?
Yes, GRIT, grit
Okay,
series.
I didn't know if it was grid or grit.
No, grit series. And I mean, that's the title I picked up. It's still in flux. The reason I started calling it grit series was because I was intentionally trying to create gritty surfaces.
And what did you use?
I used a lot of gesso on the surfaces, and then so not only just putting gesso on canvas, I went ahead and used all kinds of tools to create little emboss and patterns and crevices in the surface, and then I started painting on top of that, and then
wow.
I started using big brush strokes, this more of a circular brush, so that when you feel the surface, it feels a lot more textured. It has a lot more grit to it.
Okay. So then how do those differ from the layered?
So the layered series, the inspiration for layered series has been there for a long time. And the reason I say that is because whenever I would go on hikes or wherever I would, or nature, while people were looking towards the sunset or sunrise, I was looking at the mountains and the different layers in the rock formations that I could see, and just the geological aspect of it, and how each layer, and sometimes I would see, oh, this looks a little more reddish, and this looks a little more yellow. So the oxide, the iron oxide, and stuff like that. So that kind of gave me the inspiration to do a layered series. So I would layer one color on top of the other color, and then after I was layering, I would try and do emboss into it or etch into it or add design elements, which were more like representing as if you seeing fossils
in the rocks.
In the rocks.
That's so cool. So with these canvases, I always feel like when I look at Rajiv's work, there's great color and there must be some great emotions behind the paintings. Would you agree with that? And if I'm correct, if that's right, how do your emotions affect your painting?
It's a very interesting question. And the reason I say that is because I generally don't have major emotional swings. I am by and large a very even keel person.
You are.
But internally, I am, touch wood, grace of God, I'm a very happy person. And I know how, if I'm going down the rabbit hole of feeling sad or depressed, I have my mechanisms to quickly remind me how life is good for me. I have no reason to complain.
Okay, I want you to repeat that. I want everyone to hear that again. If you start going down the rabbit hole.
Sure. If I start going down the rabbit hole, I have certain mechanisms and certain tools to remind myself that I have no reason to complain. I have so much going on for me in life compared to so many other people that I have no reason to complain. And so I pull myself out of that. As most times I pull myself out of that place, and just, at least if I'm not in the happiest of moods, I'm in the neutral state of emotions.
So it's not like it's not, I can't compare you to Van Gogh or someone.
No, you never be. No, I am not at all Van Gogh or any of these temperamental artists. I think in some ways, if you want to talk about emotions or moods, I will definitely say I'm a more of a happy mood person,
Well, it comes across in your work. I do feel that way.
which is exactly what I was going to say to your next part, is as because by and large I'm happy and joyous, so colors automatically flow in my work, and the energy and the cultural influence, of course, is part of subconsciously the saffrons, the reds, the earth tones, the greens. They're all part of my culture, so I get drawn to colorful palette. Yes, and then of course, I mean, I the only reason, not that I have any objections to painting with white, I think it's a challenge for any artist to grow as an artist and try and paint everything. And I'm not being forced to paint in white. It's in other words, I want to clarify, I'm not creating works in white just because I have to. It's been a very satisfying experience knowing that I am actually have the skills to create something with limited palette.
That's great. That's great. When you were talking about the saffron and the greens, you're making me want to go to Pakistan. You're making me want to go travel and see everything. Describe your aesthetic in 3 words.
Happiness, energy, contentment.
That's very uplifting. I love that. And very inspiring. Thank you. Do you ever get painter's block? And if so, how do you deal with it?
I don't. I would, in some ways, to be honest, I kind of treat my painter's block as a blessing, because when I have nothing to create, if I'm not sure what I want to create, I just go and put paint on canvas. And the more paint is on my canvas, the more texture. It helps me just build textures.
So that is how you deal with the painter's block.
Yeah, that's how I deal with painter's block. And so in some ways I'm happy, because the more layers there are on my canvas, the better, the more advanced the painting. That's the feedback I've gotten, is the more advanced or more mature my painting comes across as, because people can then start identifying different layers and different colors built on that. So for me, painter's blocks is sometimes a blessing.
Very cool. What are your favorite materials to work with?
Well, definitely water media, I say. And I mean, I occasionally do watercolors, but now, of course, my favorite material is acrylics on stretch canvas, ideally primed stretch canvas. But in terms of tools, I've just discovered these more of industrial brushes, which are much bigger than the art brushes. So I'm loving them. And because their fibers are gritty as well, they're not. And so I love that, not only because they're large and then they're gritty. And so I can go crazy with those brushes.
Are you working really big right now? Are your canvases really large right now?
It's a combination between, I mean, the largest I've gone is 40 by 60, which you're aware of, but I don't want to go any larger than that because of logistical reasons at this point in time.
Okay.
But
you can use those brushes on any size canvas.
Yeah, those have been a blessing that I've discovered for these large 40 by 60s and 36 by 72 inch, because otherwise trying to do such large canvases with the small brushes would take me forever. Plus, I think the bigger brushes on big canvases bring in a lot more energy. The movement of it, I can easily play around with the movement of big brushes on big canvas, and then you can see how the strokes are dancing on the surface.
Oh, I love that visual. That was awesome. What's your favorite aspect about being an artist?
The favorite part is that I never get bored. I have something to fall back on. And so being able to just go in my studio and start doing whatever. It doesn't have to be, I could just be painting the edges of a canvas or just figuring out reworking a small piece. That's the favorite part, is that I have a great
time. Sounds like you have
talent.
a great time.
Time, yes.
And you have a great talent too.
Yeah, which I'm blessed.
And what's the hardest part about being an artist?
For me, the hardest part is I paint very quickly.
Oh.
And so I run out of material. So the hardest part is trying to store all the stuff all over the place between my house and the studio. I mean, my studio is fairly small. It's not a massive industrial. So I think that's the hardest part for me, is the logistics, storage.
Okay. Do you think creativity is something you're born with or something you're taught?
I'm going to give you a little more of a scholarly answer to this.
Any answer.
Okay, I think creativity, everybody has creativity. Everybody's born with creativity.
I think so too.
But not everybody can reach the level of Rembrandt or Van Gogh or Mozart or Beethoven or whatever. So, and there's no harm in not being able to. Everybody has whatever creativity level you have, you can maximize from that level that you have and just enjoy it.
Rajiv, I want to thank you. This was not only so inspiring, but it was so enlightening. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. Is there anything that you want, that we didn't touch on, that you want the listeners to know about you?
No, I mean, I think I appreciate the opportunity. I can definitely talk, and I always have so much to share. And maybe some other time we can talk about what I do with the digital art stuff.
Well, we can talk about a little bit now. That's fine.
For me, digital art has been, I do basic photography, and then I photograph my artwork, and I then blend them in Photoshop, and then create these unique images. And so, I mean, that's something, that's another, I mean, when you start doing creative stuff, you never know where it can lead you. So I just enjoy doing that as well.
So what size are your prints? What sizes do they come in?
They're on print on demand situation. They can go as large as you want or as small as you want.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I shouldn't say as large as you want, because of course there's a limit to the print quality that you can get. But if I have good, sometimes, I mean, most times now, but when I started initially, I wasn't paying much attention. So I could only do small prints, but now I've had situations where I can go 24 by 36 or even larger, get them printed on demand. Of course, I still haven't figured out whether I want to keep it open edition or limited edition prints and stuff like that. So that's a whole different world.
Yeah, it is a whole different world than canvas work. Yeah.
Canvas work. So at this point, I thought I'd just stick with canvas, but maybe if I find limited opportunity to work with somebody on like a print on demand situation and just small. Bottom line I'm trying to say is there's too much financial obligation on just printing all of that stuff and just letting it sit with you.
Oh, right. I mean, you print on demand. That makes sense. What's the subject? I mean, what the photography that you use in this prints, what's the subject matter or some of the subject matter you choose?
It varies. I've used most of the time it's landscapes. When I go on hike, I photograph landscape, whatever. I'm very fascinated by, as this one shows, I'm very fascinated by dead trees, or not necessarily dead, but trees that don't have any leaves here. They could be in autumn time, but they also have to be. It's not just any trees. It has to have a certain shape too. So leafless trees with certain aesthetics, a certain pattern, certain design. So I photographed them quite a bit, and I worked with that for those kind of photos. But then other than that, a lot of floral works. I've done a lot of Venice Beach, like sunset or the pier and things like that.
The natural, organic, natural.
Organic. Yeah.
Very
Organic.
cool.
And it's very experimental. I don't know. I mean, I just try and merge things and try this image and that image and this photograph of my painting. And sometimes I can try with 10 attempts and nothing comes out. And then I start with another image.
And go, yeah.
Go with it. So it's as experimental as my abstracts are, because I never know what is going to come out. There's no math to this digital work either.
You're such a creative, quintessentially creative. So I think I love your work. I'm glad that we're working together. And I want to thank you for supporting Art Dimensions with your positivity and your energy. Thank you for being a guest on my podcast today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. And to all of you and Rajiv, have a happy week and happy creating.